Welcome to Creative Writing Energy, conversations about the writer's life, craft, and alternative practices with Kim Peterson and Catherine Evans. Hello, Catherine Evans. How are you?
I'm good, Kim. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Enjoying the weather?
Oh, we've got massive storms. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's thundering right now as we're recording this on Tuesday, the 26th of November. But last night,
did you get much rain?
We got a bucket full.
We got hardly any.
The thunder and lightning went on for ages. It was awesome. And there was one particular one. I was sitting here and, I was just in my own INTP land of make-believe. And I don't know, I was just off, and this, I don't know if you remember this one, you probably would. It just cracked like right on top of the house, basically. And I'm just like, jumping out of my skin. It just like, talk about bring you back to reality.
Oh, well, it didn't come over the land here. It ducked out to sea, so we got hardly any rain. But
Yes.
I stood out. Yeah, hardly any, like spits on the ground. That was it.
Far out. You're only like 20 minutes away, if that.
Yeah. And I stood outside with my camera and I got a couple of lightning shots. I was so excited. Have to download them today.
Nice. Yeah. You should put them on our Patreon for our wonderful patrons.
I'll see. There's one, hopefully I can darken it and make it look cool. So
okay. Cool.
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right.
So it was lots of fun.
Well, today we're talking about, we're fresh back from the Wollongong's 2019 Writer Festival on the weekend that we both went to, and we just thought we'd talk a little bit about what we got out of that, because this year they had a focus on, the theme was All Lit Up, and they were focusing on writers that use storytelling to shine a spotlight on issues that would otherwise remain in the dark, which is super important. And we went to workshops, about crime and punishment and, cultural things and honor and sex and truth in writing. So it's sort of really right up our alley in that regard. And so we're going to talk about that. But first, the creativity prompt, Kath. Do you want me to do
I know, did you see that?
Which?
Take a photo of something in the distance.
Yeah.
Oh, I did it last night. Woohoo!
And you didn't know that I chose this one?
No. I just saw it and went, oh my God, can you believe that?
Yeah, so we're in sync.
Yeah. Weird, isn't it?
It's always weird. Should we do our creativity? Our oracle card.
Yes, cards.
You want to
go first? No, you do it this time.
Okay. All right. Well, I have shuffled and using the soul's journey, because we are all on a soul journey, my friends. So, first card. Fear. Ooh, how cool is that?
That goes exactly with the theme.
We see fear and we say it's cool. We are twisted sisters. I realize that I am testing my resolve to live in the energy of love.
Ooh.
Yeah, because sometimes when we want to be true to ourselves and our hearts and souls, we have to overcome a lot of fear and obstacles in order to realize that state of being.
And you have to face your fear to see your truth too, don't you?
Yeah. Definitely.
And to express it. Yeah.
Good stuff.
That's nice.
Yeah. How about you? What do you got?
Okay. We're on Trust Your Vibes, Sonia Choquettes, and today's card.
Be generous.
Be generous. Ooh.
Nice.
That's interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
What's your little
Hmm.
doohickey?
My little Duvalaki says, right now you're guided to elevate your vibration by being generous. Give of yourself rather than remaining fearful and refusing to share with others. The secret to generosity is to share freely with no strings attached, no secret agenda, and no unspoken expectation of now you owe me.
Unconditional love.
Yeah.
It's not as
These
easy as that
things
sounds.
freak me out.
I don't know why you're still freaked.
Because it just shouldn't happen. You got a random draw.
Yeah, but it happens. That's
Yeah,
the beauty of it. I don't get freaked out with things anymore.
I know. But every now and again I think about it. That's my left brain. It comes in and goes, whoa, you must have rigged that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But we don't.
Amazing. I know.
Read the cards.
Never.
All right, so let's get into the topic. Do you want to start? You did, first off, you did the shame workshop. So
yeah,
a little bit about that.
Yeah, on Friday they had a workshop on shame, that was presented by Lee Kaufman, and I suppose I should have realised before I went to it that it was about writing memoir and writing non-fiction. And but for me, shame crosses everything. You know, if I'm writing erotic romance, shame is something that comes up in it. For me personally, as well as in the stories. So I just trundled along, not kind of realising that I would be the only genre writer there and the only published person there. And oh my God, the people who were there, like, they could write like nothing on earth. So yeah, it was really eye-opening workshop. She was a fabulous presenter. She had so many memoirs that she told us about that looked at shame, you know, and opened up parts of themselves. And yeah, it was really quite interesting. But she said one thing that really early on in the workshop that just smacked me in the head. She said that likability was a social asset and it's not a literary asset.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite, yeah.
So true. I mean, a lot of people base their identities on social media and how they're being perceived in that, through those lenses, you know.
And even before social media, peer pressure, isn't it? And parental influence keeps you in that, you know, don't do that, you know, people aren't going to like you, people will shun you.
Yeah, you know, fitting into the social norms. We're sort of taught and raised to fit in, aren't we? We don't want to be
no, school's like that too, isn't it? Like, yeah.
School's very much
like that. Yeah, that's what you're learning, to fit in a structure. And oh man,
I think, you know, writing memoir is really all about getting vulnerable and how we sharing our stories in that way, and it can only benefit readers, I think. You know, well, people that are willing to go there and speak their
highlight the darker side.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, it's something, issues that we all go through. It's just those that are sort of brave enough to put it out there are just making a difference.
Yeah.
In the world.
And another thing, like, I'm in a book club and we read quite a lot of memoir, and a lot of them,
they're so.
A lot of them are.
I'm going to turn you up because of the thunder.
Oh no. Well, a lot of the memoirs that we read in book club, I really struggle to read. They seem to, I don't know what it is, like judgmental or too heartbroken, or, you know, too private to put out. But something that Lee Kaufman said was that in a good memoir, you have to put the actions and what happened, but then the reflection. And the reflection is why that something happened, or it could be how it impacted you later and changed your life, or it could be an understanding of why the person responded in that way that you've seen later on. And I think that was another thing that hit me. Like, often memoirs that I've read don't have that, so they don't have that deeper layer to the memoir. What is that?
I said, okay, it's interesting.
Yeah.
To me,
yeah, I thought
if I was going to embark on writing a memoir, it would be all about reflection. That's me.
Yeah. But that's I didn't quite work that out, that was the difference in the memoirs I like and the memoirs I don't like, is if they don't have the reflection, I don't like them.
Yeah.
That they're too open, vulnerable, and they don't have any meaning for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the ones with reflection and the ones that are done with intelligence and kind of like a distance, so they're not bleeding all over the page anymore. It's kind of not, it's the next step past cathartic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what so they were my takeouts from that workshop. It was awesome.
Okay. Are you going to write a memoir anytime soon?
Well, she introduced me to creative nonfiction, which is taking something out of your life and then creating a story around that. Okay. And yeah, that interests me.
Okay.
Don't know how soon I'll do that, but yeah, that's what I'm going to play with for a little bit, I think.
Nice.
It's nice to be inspired.
It is. And I mean, I found the topics, I mean, the Wollongong's Writer Festival, it was sort of more like a celebration of diversity and in our writing, and you know, a collection of authors that are using their words to make a difference. To try to make change. You know, we went to the the Crime and Punishment panel with Tony Birch and Jess Hill, and I cannot remember. Bree Lee. Yeah, that was really interesting. I found that one quite interesting because you know, they're talking about systems and structures of crime and punishment and the foundations of power and control on which they're built. And these authors have really dedicated, you know, their writing lives to trying to make a difference in the systems that exist in Australia. And, you know, I found some of the things that they said were just really interesting. I loved it when they spoke about their writing process. That really resonated with me, but I don't sort of probably go in as deep as Jess Hill. Do you remember when she said, because Jess Hill's an investigative, I can't pronounce that word, journalist who writes about domestic violence, which is something I've had experience in, as not writing, but yeah, as part of my life experience. She gets really visceral, and she takes herself to the edge when she sort of puts herself and immerses herself into the roles of her characters. And she also stressed the importance to look after and care for the victims and hold them as she's writing their stories. Because when you're telling a story, you're not just telling your story, you know, it's a responsibility and a service to the people involved. What do you think, Kath?
Yeah, I thought that she spoke really well about that, because she was the only person who hadn't been directly affected by a violent past in herself. Yeah, and yet she'd found it later in her family line, hadn't she? But
yes, and she also said that she immersed herself into the roles of the victim so much that when she'd go and interview the perpetrators and whatnot, she was actually feeling scared of these people, you know? Like, she really sort of ingrained herself into that role to very...
and she said she'd isolated herself hadn't she, as she was writing from her family and friends and kind of lost herself in that process.
Yep. So that was interesting, and I love it when people are kind of really challenging the way things are to make difference, because that's what writing's all about, I think, making differences in the ways that we can.
Yeah.
And it's really admirable to see this in authors and Australian authors. And Tony Birch, I mean, he's amazing, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's one of your favourites. You want to talk a little bit about Tony Birch? He's a renowned Indigenous Australian author.
Yeah, and an academic. He's taught writing at university for many years. He writes essays as well as short stories, and he's quite an activist for various different causes. But his writing, in my book club, we read Shadowboxing not long after it came out, and there's some things that hit so hard about his writing and his story. It was so, I don't know, the violence was there, but it was all beneath the surface, and what bubbled out of his writing was this great joy and love of living, and connections to people. And even though it was so awful, the situation and everything I've read of his just resonated with that joy and love and connection, even when it was incredibly violent and horrible. And I think every time he spoke on the weekend, that's how he spoke too. I was so surprised.
He spoke about bringing the tenderness. He doesn't want to write with anger anymore. And this is a man that has experienced an extremely violent childhood at the hands of his father. And he spoke about ethical commandment, bringing ethics into your words, and that kind of thing. And I really thought that his story about the butcher's wife was extremely interesting, because this man, I guess I'm thinking that it must have been, I know it was 1969, but he must have lived in an Indigenous area in Melbourne.
He grew up in Fitzroy, I think, which was like in Victoria, like an inner city. I don't know if it was housing commission or not, but they were like all on top of each other, and they all in a little like community where they all lived together and were in and out of each other's houses.
It sounded to me might have been.
I don't know if it was Indigenous or just a lower socio-economic group, where they, like a housing commission type setup. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, but his story about the butcher's wife, where and he wrote a short story about it, went on to write as an adult, but he went to school with the children of the couple, and the husband had been violent with his wife, and history of that, and then he assaulted her in the street in front of the neighbours, and that night she cut off his head and limbs, and then and went and scattered it around the neighbourhood. And I'm not laughing, but anyway, she didn't serve any time.
She went to court,
but she
was acquitted.
Yeah. So, and there was a big celebration back then of her acquittal, because everyone knew of the abuse and the.
Well, I think it was worse, because I think every woman in the street had been abused.
Well, that's
that time, wasn't it?
Environment that he grew up in. I was asking, and it sounded like it was.
Yeah, men drank, they came home, beat up their wife and kids, and went to bed. Yeah,
horrible.
That was pretty much what shadowboxing was about. It was.
Yeah.
And
that listening to his story, and he had mentioned a few things that really resonated with me, and he spoke about how when you're in that kind of environment, it's kind of, you feel the build up to the explosion, and you're kind of hoping, you're kind of pushing it a little bit for it to happen. You kind of get to a point and it's like, just happen, and it happens, you know, you get hurt, and then afterwards there's this sense of relief, because you know you've got a few weeks, or, you know, yeah, however long the cycle is, where you're going to get some peace and everything's going to settle down. It's like a cycle. And when I was in that environment, that is exactly how I used to describe it. I would think in my head, I would see my life in cycles, and it was the cycle of the build up, the explosion, and then I was right for a while. And because, you know, he'd feel like shit after, and he'd be apologetic and, you know, nice as pie and blah blah blah, and that's how my life was, one big cycle. And I completely understood what he meant by that, because that's how he lived even as a child, you know, like witnessing and being in that environment. It's this horrible vicious cycle. And I find a lot of women listening to those stories, they just feel, you know, like that woman that sort of deliberately became anorexic just so she could get some time away and go into hospital away from her partner, so she wouldn't have to deal with the violence and being treated that way, you know. And she thought she didn't have a choice, because you get so downtrodden and brainwashed that you can't live without these people. And you know, it's an eye-opener, because victims in that situation do feel that there's no way out. And for the longest time I felt that way too. I thought there was nowhere to go. You know, I didn't really have much family support, you know, and you kind of think, well, there's nowhere to be. Yeah, but there's always an option, and there's a lot of resources out there to help. And we're kind of going off topic now, like.
No, I was going to say, when you read or when you hear people speak and they were in a similar situation, does it validate how you felt? Is there that sense of, oh, thank God somebody else felt like me?
Yes, yeah, for sure. It's kind of, in a way, surprising, because I'd never heard of anyone else say what he said on the weekend about that cycle and about that relief part, because it sounds really warped when you think about it. It's like, come on, you know, just explode, just hit me, just do it. And that just sounds fucked up, you know what I mean? But when you're in that situation, you don't want it, but the tension is just so extreme and intense that you just need to get over that part, and then, you know, and you're sitting there and you're feeling like shit, and you're feeling guilty, like that's guilt, like for yourself, because, you know, I didn't grow up in this low socio-economic environment or a housing commission, and my father, he didn't hit my mother, and my mother's next husband, he wasn't violent. Like, I did not grow up in a violent household, so it's not like it was part of who I was, you know. None of my family members, extended family, were violent. There's a little bit of violence on my mother's side, but that's sort of, you know, back in her, you know, it didn't affect me directly. So it was very new to me to be treated in a violent environment, you know, and early on I kind of, I don't know, when you start having children, you feel contained, you know, and it was not just violent. The abuse that is so much more. There's so many more layers to that, because a man won't just be violent. That's just the surface, you know. It all goes on to the emotional and the you know, what are the other abuses? Everything, emotional, psychological. Yes, yes, it's the word. It's very more psychological based, where it's a constant judgment on everything. On everything that I did was judged, and how I looked, and you know, no one else would want me. It's like just always putting you down for things, and you start to believe it. But I'm quite resilient. You know, I just have this, and I think as I moved more through it, I just thought, screw this. I remember thinking one night, is this me for the rest of my life? You know, like, fuck that shit, you know. And yeah, you either got to make a choice to change things, or you don't, you know. And I remember when I left, you know, one of my friends said to me, not many people get away from a Bevan. And they don't, because like what we saw in the weekend, it just made me realize that so many women accept that as part of their lives. They accept that to be true for their existence. And that's got to change. And these authors writing about these things and shedding light on it, you know, and trying to change the system, it's what we need, because, you know, it starts with the victims, it starts with the perpetrators. Something's got to change.
It starts to change society, doesn't it?
Society, yeah. And violence against women, like Bree, what was her last name?
Bree Lee.
And she was saying that violence against women and children, but we won't go with the children part, only like 1 in 500 perpetrators will actually get picked up for it and punished, or, you know, whatever, held accountable. And that's why so many women are getting hurt, because they just get raped and hurt and beat up. And yeah.
And I think it was her too who said society needed to change to, instead of valuing the individual, they had to value people who cared for other people and people who cared for the environment. So we had to care for, or we had to value caring and people, not individuals and money and power. And I was thinking, oh, thank God people think like that.
Oh, there are people. Yeah.
But we're kind of like it feels like the French Revolution, you know, where there's that big layer of power and there's all these little people who are unhappy, and oh God, I hope they can rise up and, you know, guillotine off that level of power, and we can change society around, because, you know, caring for people and the environment is a really noble thing to do, and it's so undervalued.
Yeah. And it starts with, you know, people's mindsets, and there's always that level of power that, and how Tony Burke was talking about, you know, people, there's people that, well, I think he was more talking in this instance about the way Aboriginal Indigenous people have been treated in the past in Australia, in the stolen generation, and they would just come and take the children away from their parents just because, you know.
Yeah.
I'm going to get teary now. Just really.
But he spoke too about the Aboriginal woman who wasn't allowed to marry the man that she wanted to marry because he was too dark, and she should marry someone whiter so her children were whiter. You know, like, what kind of a valid excuse is that? It was appalling.
No excuse, but what you know, and the so these government officials that made these calls, you know, and he was talking about they would get to the end of their lives and they would still think that they're right for the treatment that they handed down.
Yeah. And people, it was just another thing he said in that truth thing, which really hit me, is that a lot of society nowadays decisions is based on fear of right-wing conservatism, and not that people themselves are right-wing conservatives. And I think that's it. You know, if you live in fear, you don't face your truth and you don't change society. You know, like, we have to stop fearing these people with their hate crimes and their messages of hate. We have to stand up and, you know, like you keep saying,
it's the driving emotion, and fear is like the complete opposite to love.
Yeah, we have to learn to love. We have to become a society that built on love,
and accept that the viewpoints are not always going to be aligned with your own, and that's perfectly okay. You know, like, accept the
live your life and
that's what
live your life and don't impact on others, isn't it?
I don't understand that mentality, and you know. Anyway,
so then
and what about sex?
Sex is weird. That was the funnest panel, wasn't it?
Move on to something a little bit lighter, because there's something at my door.
That ghost is there again.
Sex. So sex.
Well, sex is weird. I think
funny.
Well, it was the best panel because I think they all agreed that sex was weird. You know, we had the neuropsychologist who said, yes, humans are the only people who have sex at any time just for enjoyment. You know, it's not based on procreation. And every person on that panel was incredibly honest and open and shared their vulnerability. Like, it just blew me away, that panel. It was amazing.
So I was telling, just as a side note, I had my son Julian here for, well, he was staying in Sydney, but you know, he came down a few times to see us, and he was here on Sunday because he flew out yesterday, and I was telling him about the sex panel a bit, because you know, he's 22, and he's very much like me in a lot of ways, Julian. I think out of all my children, we clash like hell. Well, we did when he was younger, but he's also extremely like open, and the way he sees the world is awesome. Like, he's such a remarkable kid. I shouldn't call him a kid, he would hate that. But anyway, I was telling him about the hostess, the host for that panel, and she was a sex worker, and she opened it and she said, yesterday I made $350 for jerking off a man with sandpaper. And straight away, Julian's like, oh my God, that's like the human centipede. He's got this thing about the movie, The Human Centipede. And I cracked up laughing because it's like the third time he's brought up that movie. It's scarred him for life, and it's disgusting. I haven't seen it, and I would never even put myself in that situation to see it. Have you seen it?
No. When did he watch it? Like, when he was
years ago. He watched it years ago, but it's just like this. It's screwed up his psyche. He's like, you know, and he's like, it's scarred me for life, Mum. I can get it out of my head. It's like this man. He kidnaps these tourists and then sews them from mouth to anal.
God.
I know. But apparently he jerks off like with sandpaper, and Julian's like, and there was blood everywhere, and after he's jerking off, and gross.
Scarred for life.
Yeah, my kid's scarred for life from that movie. And it is funny. But yes, anyway.
So that panel,
very open panel about sex, and it was very refreshing, you know, because people get so fucking uptight about sex, don't they?
Yep. And that's what some of the stuff they were saying, you know, like, people get so uptight about it that all you really need to do is communicate well.
Yeah.
With, you know, vulnerable and open conversations. Be honest.
I mean, why do people get so uptight when everyone does it?
You get created from it.
It's actually part of expressing love. I mean, you know,
or enjoyment.
And you're not in love. It's a part of enjoying pleasure and pleasuring your body and pleasuring someone else. It can't be all that freaking bad. I mean, they put, you know, violence is so widespread and so in your face. Although I can't say that, you know, with the whole nature of our the internet with pornography and things. I think that's a bit too much, mainly for our children, because, like, you know.
But the positive side of sex is about love and enjoyment and pleasure and joy, and they're the happy emotions in life. And yet the shame and guilt and horror and violence and power kicks that people put on sex are the awful things in life. Like, we really have to flick society around so that we're valuing those positive emotions. It's just, it drives me nuts.
I know. What do you do? I mean, it's like people like at the panel, and then people like us even talking about it. It's kind of just putting it out in the world more and trying. That's the way change happens eventually, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, on that panel, that Quinn Eads spoke, and he said something that he started speaking about his sex. He was a transgender person, so to speak about sex, to speak about his life and his decisions to change gender, opened him up to a vulnerability and brought out fear. And I was thinking, oh yes, but his fear and vulnerability were on a level like that he could lose his kids, that he would lose his job.
Yes.
You know, like, that's human rights, isn't it? You know, like, and this is in this day and age. Like, we're not talking about 50 years ago with the stolen generation. We're talking about now.
Yeah, but it's
because he was talking about sex.
Yeah.
He could lose everything that he had, his entire being. You know, God, that was shocking to me.
I feel that people that sort of come into the world that feel that way, like that man, Quinn, what's his name? Sorry,
Eads.
Yeah, you know, and he was obviously born as a female, and then later on, and he'd had children, and then transgendered into a male. Now that cannot be an easy place to be. You know, if you're in this body and you're feeling like it's not feeling quite right. And I think the bigger picture thinking, you know, that kind of, you go into a sort of more of the deeper thinking that does happen at times. People like that have got to choose to come into bodies like that in order and go through that sort of trauma and the discrimination and the stigma. It's not an easy life to choose, yet they've chosen that, and they've chosen it to help make the difference, to kind of change the patterns of the way society thinks and lives and views the world, because it's just on so many levels not an accepting society in so many ways. And that's the change I think that these people do come here to sort of, you know, stamp into the human condition.
Yeah.
And make change.
And his honesty and vulnerability were
very
just
admirable,
more inspiring.
Very inspiring. Yeah. A lot of those talks that we saw were very inspiring, and it inspired, you know, because I write a lot of sort of get vulnerable and things with my blog this year, and it kind of just gave me a little bit of vindication. And yeah, you know, nothing's going to change if we don't talk about these things and put it out in the world, because what you're putting out in the world sort of gives other people permission to accept what they might be going through that they can relate with in your situation. Because we're all going through our things and our issues, and life isn't always easy a lot of the time. So, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I think I've been doing a bit of energy stuff lately, like watching some energy things, and it was saying that as you change and your energy changes, your sphere of influence changes those around you.
Yeah.
So I was thinking on the weekend, as we all sat there and listened to these people, we were all changing from what they were saying, and then we go home and we change the people around us, and we change whoever listens to us.
Yeah.
And it was like, yes, like, you know, chuck a pebble in the water and the ripples go out. You know,
yeah,
like,
the ripple
you
effect.
just don't know, who you're
lovely,
influencing and what change could happen.
It's very much like that. Like I know that we're kind of probably pushing for time now, but just quickly, the ripple effect, even sort of when you're witnessing something or something going on that's not specifically spoken to you, but a situation or a circumstance. Like I wrote one of my blog posts about an elderly couple that lived in my boyfriend's street when I was a teenager, and it was well known that, you know, he abused this woman, domestic violence and things, and it went on, and they were old, and when they would drive down the road, this woman would sit in the back seat because she was not worthy enough to sit next to him in the front seat. And that stuck with me. Like I remember when I was, you know, I think I was probably like 16, 17, and it just broke me every time I saw it, and I'd feel this sense of injustice for her and this sense of hate for him, you know, at that time. And oh, my cat's stuck in the rain. Hold on. Yep, sorry, I'm back. The cat's all dry. So yeah, it's just watching that made an impact on me, the ripple effect. But it didn't kind of hit until later on. I was in that similar environment where her image in the back seat of that car just kept sort of coming in my head. And I was like, I'm not going to be that woman. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get to the end of my life with this man and you know, not going to allow that. So, you know, her experience impacted my experience with the ripple.
She was part of your strength to go?
She was definitely part of it. So it's like, you know, I was meant to see that situation because I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't grown up in violent environment. So that was pretty much the closest first-hand experience I'd seen of domestic violence and the effect of that. Like apart from, you know, when you see them on shows or movies, and I'm talking in real life, first-hand experience, and I didn't see the violence, but that was enough for me to see that made all the difference to me, you know. So I thank that lady
for her impact.
So how did your card go? How'd you go, card?
Be generous.
Be generous with your love.
And I think too, thanks to everyone at the Wollongong Writers Festival, because their generosity has had a huge impact on me.
With your sharing your experiences and facing your fears. And facing your fears and sharing that and getting vulnerable is an act of generosity.
Yeah, it is.
I realize that I am testing my resolve to live in the energy of love. It's not always easy to live in the energy of love, but the more
let's aim for that.
The more we do it, the better this world's going to be. Yeah. So you want to wrap up and tell everyone where they can find us?
Yes. Thanks for joining in our conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to Creative Writing Energy on your preferred podcast platform or YouTube, so you'll be notified when our episodes become available. And if you'd like to get more involved, we have a Patreon page where you can support us for as little as $1 a month on www.patreon.com/Creative Writing Energy. And you can find us at whisperinginkpress.com/Creative Writing Energy, where you can find links to everything that we're doing.
Cool. Nice. Yeah.
Thanks for a good chat today.
It was a long chat. Yeah, actually, it was a really good chat. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So much energy from writing events.
Yeah, there is. And it's funny.
Now we have to write.
Even if you think that you don't kind of realize what you the takeaways sometimes until you talk about it later. It incubates.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go incubate some more. And enjoy.
See you later.
Bye.